to the sign of the Township. Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none, we will move on to the mayor's address. On September 4th, 2020, I attended the Edenville Legion barbecue with Councilor Maria Robinson. During the barbecue, Edenville Rotary Club presented a check from their fundraising committee to the Edenville Legion for $83,000. Thank you to all the residents who supported our local Legion with their generous donations. And my understanding from that meeting that night is that the donations are still growing. Our new meeting management software program is being introduced to staff and council. Prior to this meeting of September 15th, 2020, training has been completed, and we look forward to the efficiencies that this new program will provide. At a special meeting of council on September 10th, 2020, council agreed with the recommendation from our volunteer fire department to include heavy extrication as part of the service provided to our residents. Council has approved $60,000 from our efficiency funding reserve budgeted for 2020 for the purchase of the necessary equipment. Members of our volunteer fire department are continuing with the renovations to the Golden Lake Fire Hall and are expecting to complete the work by early November. At this point, over 300 hours of volunteer time have been invested in this project to date. That is my mayor's address. So we move to item number 5, which is the adoption of the minutes. Prior to that, I'll just ask for a resolution that the September 15th, 2020 mayor's address be accepted as presented. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councilor Robinson, seconded by Councilor Schoenfeld. Councilor Buchwald?
Yes.
Councilor Burns?
Yes.
Councilor Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Councilor Robinson?
Yes.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you very much. Item 5.1, I have a resolution that council accepts the September 1st, 2020 regular council minutes and the September 10th, 2020 special council minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councilor Buchwald, seconded by Councilor Robinson. Any additions, corrections, or omissions? So we'll vote on the minutes as presented. Councilor Buchwald?
Yes.
Councilor Byrne?
Yes.
Councilor Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Councilor Robinson?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that's carried. Thank you. That brings us to item 6, which is our delegations. And with us tonight, we have our detachment commander, Staff Sergeant Pat. Oh, you'll have to correct me. Guy Siviero.
Your pleasure, your worship. It's DeSeverio.
DeSeverio. I was close.
Oh, yeah, you're. So, your worship, council. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you. I'm sorry it's taken me this long to make my rounds, but I got here on paper. I transferred to Silver Detachment. I want to say December 23rd. You know, really care that it's Christmas. So 2 weeks of vacation, so I actually physically showed up for January 6th. I was drinking through a fire hose and still am, and in the way of trying to understand who's who in the zoo and get things going. And then the COVID arrived, so it's taken me this long to get to see council. So I apologize for that, but I am making my rounds. I got to see a couple of municipalities and their mayor and their council. So now it's your turn to put up with me. So I don't have anything on my agenda. I just came to introduce myself. Pat Severio, I'm an Ottawa boy born and raised, and for me, this is coming back home. I don't desire to go back to Ottawa. I wanted this area. My first 5 years of my career were in northwestern Ontario. I started in Geraldton. You know where that is. It's about 300 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay. Just telling Andrew's front that when you apply to the OVP, you ask part of the application process is the top 3 places you want to go. And it's like, okay, Westport and Ananakwe. I can't remember what my third choice was, and then you get the phone call, you're successful. Do you accept going to Geraldton? And I said, absolutely. And then it was just a matter of hang up the phone and go find an app. And then I'm trying to find Geraldton, and I'm like, this is. So I thought it would stand out to me, and I go to the index, and all of a sudden I flip into the white side of the page. But you know what? Absolutely the best part of my career, the best 5 years of my career to date was in Northern Ontario. I really enjoyed that small town feeling. I enjoyed the municipality. I was very fortunate to become an emergency response team member up there with just 2 years on the police service, and I kept doing that earth thing for 13 years. And while still doing frontline stuff, I took over from my coach officer for the last 3 years as First Nations liaison to the local post, Martin Falls. So I'm well versed in the First Nations community, doing fly-ins and that kind of thing. So I did my 5 years there, and then came back to this area because my wife at the time, I've since divorced and married. We're allowed one mulligan, and so she was going to go to school at Algona in Ottawa. So okay, transfer back kind of the home area, and I wanted to keep my emergency response team spot. So that took me to Ottawa traffic for 2 years. So I did nothing but traffic, but I enjoyed that piece of my career as well. And then apparently I always thought I would stay put, but my career hasn't taken me that way. So I spent 2 years Ottawa traffic, and then I went and did 2 years in SDGs from Dundas and Blanchard County, living in Kempville, working out of Winchester. And then come 2004, I decided to expand my ERC career and emergency response team career. And I took this applied for and got the Central Region Emergency Response Team Coordinator position, and that took me to Central Ontario for 2004 to 2000. So now. And so while I was there, I left the ERC program in 2010. And I became the Central Region HR analyst and well versed in HR stuff. And I'm sure your worship and council, you see some of that stuff come to your table. And that's high risk stuff that can get an organization or a municipality in lots of trouble. So I'm well versed in that area. And what else did I do? I couldn't keep a job during that time either. I was the HR analyst for about 5 years, but I actually sat in that chair for a year and a half. So 8 months, I went and did Lieutenant Governor's Protection Unit with time was Lieutenant Governor in Conley. What else did I do? I went back to Nottawasaga at the detachment level. I worked in Nottawasaga for 2 years, where we had 3 municipalities, all contracts. So I'm familiar with 5.1s in Section 10 contracts and the Food Services Act. And a couple of things here and there. And then I became, in 2014, I became the manager of the Weapons Services section for the OPP. So that was just controllership of all the OPP sports equipment. Did that for about 3 or 4 years. Made a commitment to them that I wouldn't leave there until I got us a new firearm. And I'm probably somewhat versed with the Imperial government's procurement process. I am now. That's something different. That's a difficult thing. So But it took me 3 years and three RFPs, requests for bids, and I won't bore you with the details, but the fact that I can talk to you about RFPs and sole source procurements and that kind of stuff hurts me. Because I joined to be a police officer, and I joke sometimes I might just take my badge and war card away, my gun belt, because I seem to have strayed away from just pulling over cars and fighting crime and catching bad guys and girls. But now that I'm here, I still do a little bit of that. I get out of the car as much as I can. So I left the weapons services section in May of 2019, and I went to be the detachment manager at Huronia West, aka Wasaga Beach. So that's the town of Wasaga Beach and then 2 other municipalities in Springwater and Fairview. And then I applied to this job in October or so of 2019, and here I do. That's my life in a nutshell. I can't keep the job as far as I know, and from what my bride tells me, we're staying here. So she's also an officer. She's posted to Petawawa. You're probably the bosses in your home. I'm not in mine. And so she gets the 6-minute ride to work, and I get the 50-minute ride to work. So that's the way that goes. That's me in a nutshell. I'm very, very happy to be here. I have 4 years until I can retire. I don't feel it yet, so I think I'm going to be stuck with me for a while. I have no want to do anywhere else. I like being here. I'm very fortunate to be here. I had aspirations in my career, but it was only short-lived. It was just to the next step kind of deal, and this is my next step. And I'm going. I'll put me in a nutshell. I'll take any questions or concerns you may have. If I don't know something, by the way, I'm very honest, forthright. I put all my cards on the table. I really do. If I can't tell you something, I'll tell you straight out. I just can't tell you. That's private confidential. Otherwise, I'm a pretty open book. Once you decide to kick me out of here, I'd left to do my business cards here. Remember, I already gave you one. This is the one though that has my correct cell number on the back. So please, council members, please grab one. If you need anything at all, you have any questions or concerns. I love email, except things get lost and sometimes you read tone when you listen. Pick up the phone and call. As long as I'm in country, and thanks to the cocoa, it doesn't look like I'm going on a cruise anytime soon. We're going out of the country, so as long as I'm in country, the phone's on 24/7. But the email isn't. I kind of turn it off at night around 10, and it comes back on longer around 6 a.m. Call, please.
Do you have like a goal or something you'd like to see in your tenure of being here that you'd like to change or you would like to work on or something?
Great question. No, my intention when I go somewhere is to make it a little better than it was before I got there. And I don't know what that looks like. I would hope that, and I have received some feedback, and that's not just from the municipality side of the house, it's also from my members, it's also from my region, and the larger OPP, and even from my personal side of the house, is to just leave things a little better than when I first got there. So I receive some feedback that it's going that way, and that's good. Am I going to mess up? Probably. Am I going to be not able to make you as happy as you like? Probably. But overall, that's my goal, is to make things a little better than when I got here. Because inevitably, when the time comes for me to move along, someone's going to come by and do the exact same thing. You're going to take it from where I left it and just take it to the next level. And I think as long as that's always been my goal, whether we're weapons services section or going auto traffic or leading my central region emergency response team, 42 ERT guys, 4 canine handlers, 12 negotiators, whatever it is, just make it a little better. And when it's time to go, it's time to go.
Thanks.
I have a question, and just in relation to motor vehicle collisions, if it's a motor vehicle collision and there's different departments responding depending on who's closest, how does the commander, who takes charge of that scene when they arrive, or as other officers arrive?
Are you speaking, your worship, simply from the policing side of it?
From the
Or are you
policing.
speaking from the different, like EMS, fire, all those different partners showing up in case command?
Most specifically from the policing side.
It'll be whatever jurisdiction you're in. That being said, we do have arrangements with my counterpart in Pembroke. If they're way up fighting crime in Pembroke, and there's a call at Pride Green, even though it's in their detachment area, well, because it's a two-way street, right? So, that answer your question?
And just because I know with fire, there's a first response agreement, the Department of Response first takes charge of the scene and tell the municipality who's responsible arrives, and then it's transferred. Is OPP operating the same way?
Typically, yes, but we'll keep, if it's simple enough, we'll keep it. If we'll run with it. It's a little different for us because we're all the same organization. When you're speaking of different municipalities, but I do see where you might say if it's a larger incident and our officers are tied up with that particular incident, well, that still gets scored to their dark code. So it wouldn't show up in your area. Those officers will be working, scoring their time in their location when they do their jobs.
Thank you. The only other question I had, and I know we talked about it previously, and that was the community well-being. And safety well-being.
Plans?
Yes. And maybe just for all of council, a little bit of, because I wasn't clear myself what the intent and goal was until we had that conversation.
Sure. So my understanding of community safety and well-being plans was the Ontario government coming out with the understanding or the position that the best way to solve a community's issues is by a community itself and its municipality taking ownership of that issue. And then bringing the partners in to deal with that particular problem. The planning piece comes when you need to know who those partners are first and who does what. And the example I believe I gave you, Mayor Rose, was if I go to a domestic, well, typically my experience has been you're going to keep going back to that house. It's not just a one-time thing. So if I go there, the only thing the police can do that when they go to a domestic is criminal charges. Either do you leave them or do you not? Yes, you check on the well-being of everybody. That's first and foremost is how people are doing their health, right? Because they need medical attention. But they were fighting about something. So what brought them to the point where they're at? It's not enough to say, well, they just don't get along. Is it an alcohol issue? Is it they can't put food on the table? Is it because they're at their wits' end because they're parenting a 12-year-old Asperger's child and they just don't have the capacity to, whether it's a financial capacity and or a emotional capacity and or some kind of building blocks of how you teach this child, whatever it is. Well, once I deal with the policing side of it, I leave. But these people aren't helped. So there are other community partners that are best suited to serve there. If I get the call because my neighbors hear my wife and I yelling, well, okay, the police come. I don't find it domestic. Well, what are they yelling about? Well, they're yelling because he's just spent all the money on his gambling addiction. Well, what's the community? The cops have to hook them up with the right community service. But I don't know what that right community service is. Or how do I, it's midnight, how do I get that community service there first thing in the morning? That's what the community safety and well-being plan is. So that I know who I send an email to that were my officers, who I send an email to that very night, who's going to show up for them in the morning, who can I call right then and there if it's an issue of they can't put food on the table, or they can't get diapers, whatever it is. That's what community safety and well-being plan is. Policing historically has been, if it doesn't fall into these categories, the cops will do it. Well, policing now, in this municipality, like the others know, it's expensive, very expensive. The last thing you want is the finite resource of your policing services working on things that aren't even in their realm. You want them doing calls for service. And then if they're not doing calls for service, you want them making your community safer. Typically, that's by proactive, going to look at properties, looking for potential meters, doing traffic enforcement. I'm a big proponent of traffic safety. I'm a big proponent of if there's cars moving, stop them. Not to give a ticket or anything. It's about education, engagement, and enforcement. I'm a big proponent of that. How else do you find out if it's an impaired driver? Granted, you can't just arbitrarily pull cars over. That's not what I'm suggesting at all, nor can you do it, nor does that happen, or at least I hope it's not happening. But if there's no turn signal, stop them. I'm not saying you're going to give them a ticket for not using the turn signal, but what's the worst part that comes out of it? Education and getting to know who's in the vehicle and getting to know who's in the community. That's great. That's a good thing. That's a good interaction that lets you know the cops are out there. You get to know who that is. Inevitably, small communities, you're going to run into them again. And chances are, you've met them before. They're the witness to the mischief that you're trying to solve. You don't know until you get that community engagement going. And traffic safety is the best way to do that. You know, one of my big initiatives when I came here, and again, the COVID threw a wrench into it, but it's okay. We'll get out of this in another year and a half, 18 months. But was stop and talks. Get out of your car and walk in communities. Talk to somebody that you don't know. One of the things I've come to see in Killaroo detachment is you're a very fortunate set of municipalities here. Your officers, there might be one or two that are not local. They're either from here, married into here, or have made this their home. They're not going. They know everything. But if there's crime to be solved, they figure it out. And it's because other members that they are either related to or no one after lies are calling them at home saying, I think so-and-so is doing this. So I think so-and-so is involved in that. Like, that's a very, my understanding is that wasn't always the case because we went through a period where there was a turnstile for young officers. And those things are cyclical. Will it come back again? Probably. I know we get our newest probationary, and we haven't had a probationary officer here in 2.5 years, or not, no, probably more, 3.5. That would be McDougal is the newest guy. So, but she'll be here mid-October. So there's a new officer. But that's the newest. Everyone else is minimum 3 years, and then after that, they've been there for I bet you 10 or more. It's a very great advantage you have for this detachment, and I like that. I like that very much. So my only issue is get them to stop talking to people they already know. Is I want them to go out and explore other zones. I want them to go out and introduce themselves to the Rotary public.
Please. I know Killaloo has a roundtable process that they do with mental health.
Situation table.
Has that been negatively affected with COVID, or is that still ongoing? So I know it was doing a great job with reducing a lot of 911 calls and some other issues. I think it ties nicely in with your safety well-being plans that we kind of something to build on. So I'm just wondering, is that still actively going on with the various restrictions?
My understanding it is. I think it's stalled for a little while. Is everyone here familiar with the situation table and what that is? No. Okay, so a situation table is you're correct. It's a very good example of the community safety well-being plans working. So about partners in the community come together at a situation table and they bring a file folder. And that file folder is their person or family that they've identified in that month that requires the greatest amount of help. And I believe the threshold is, I think the word they use is acute stress or something of that nature. So yes, there are lots of people that need help. So, but they have to be at a certain level. So every partner comes in, and so Catherine Yarrow is my community safety officer. She would come with person X to the table, and EMS or social services or family connections or CAS or with county health or whoever the partners are sitting at the situation table. They come with their file folder and they don't say who the person is. They just introduce what the issue is or whether it's a person or a family. And then from there, they pick the one to go in. And then the file folder gets opened. And then they confirm that, yes, this person or this family is in acute distress. And then it's who's the best agency at that table or combination thereof to help this person. My understanding is for the past, I think it's almost 2 years now, my community safety officer, who's awesome, and I've heard nothing but good things from the community about her. I haven't heard a bad word. Every month that she brought a person from that's come into our wheelhouse from a policing perspective has gone, she's brought to the table, and every month it's been hers. What that tells me is we're finding the people as police officers answering regular calls for service that are in the greatest need for assistance in your community. It's not those other stakeholders. But when she produces the file, we've already done our thing. Person X that I'm thinking of right now, yes, I have him charged for possession. I have him charged for mischief to my cells because of the damage he did while he was locked up. Yes, I have him for all those things. I have him released on the proper documentation. Yes, he was just because he's a mental health issue doesn't mean that he's free of criminal charges. No, we run those parallels. So yes, we did form him under the Mental Health Act, and we did take him to Pembroke Hospital. But now what? Well, what we've come to learn is every time Catherine brings person X, Y, or Z to the table is we've done our thing. Who's going to help the man? And it's these other partners that need to help that person. Otherwise, he's just going to keep coming back to us. That's not a resolution. That's a short-term fix in the way of getting him the mental health part help he needs. It's a temporary fix insofar as he was in bad shape that night and could have died of hypothermia. So okay, we took care of that, but we haven't solved the problem. The police aren't the ones to solve this problem. We can't. It's outside our realm, but we're seeing them all the time. he's one of our prolific callers. And that's what Catherine, our community safety officer, if I could produce 2 CAFRs, that's what I would do. But I can't, I don't have the staffing level to do it. Because what she's done with our prolific caller program and our mental health, I'll call it a MARU, a mental health response unit, different acronyms across province, is if we can get these people the help they need, the less they're calling us, they're getting the help they need. We're not using our finite resources to go help them because they don't need police anymore. They don't need police intervention. That doesn't mean they may not ever, but we've cut down the calls from like 11 a month to maybe 1, maybe 2. Well, that gives us an opportunity to go do all that proactive traffic stuff that I wanted to know. Like, how am I, if I'm dealing with him 6 to 8 hours a night, 10 nights a month, how am I supposed to be catching the bad guy or bad girl that's committing mischief in the park at Montshire Valley or doing damage to your municipal office? Like, I'm not saying I'm gonna be magic cop and be Johnny on the spot when somebody's tagging your building, but I definitely don't have a chance catching that person if I'm dealing with this guy as much as I would be if I didn't have Catherine Drummond doing her thing. And our cops know how to engage Catherine to do that. So that's a good example of police aren't meant to do it on their own. And that's what community safety wellbeing plan recognizes this. Policing can't do it on their own. EMS can't do it on their own. Fire can't do it. Because sometimes you go into a private group home or you go into an establishment and it's not just that they don't have food on the table, but the electrical hasn't been maintained. Now it's a fire hazard. Well, this is a situation, right? I'll contact them. I know who to contact them, right? And the phone calls go up, bang, 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 bang. But that's all in your community safety well-being plan. And then we all, as partners, work off of that municipality's plan.
But I'm just anticipating, because you talked about it, you made reference to the calls would potentially go down. But the first line often has been, it's a 911 call going out. So I'm trying to understand the benefit then of the community safety and well-being plan when most of the calls will still be being issued.
It's the difference of me spending 10 minutes there or me spending 3 hours there. Because what's happening now is it's my cost, your cost, trying to talk to them about financial woes, alcoholism, and we were talking from what we got trained, that little bit trained at Ontario Police College. I know some of our officers bring in their personal experiences. I know I do. We're not the professionals in that realm. That's the difference. When I get there, if it's not my wheelhouse, I should be able to clear that call in 10, 15 minutes. But I appreciate, especially here, like if I go to Barrie City Police, those resources are already in the city, right? Where I came from, say, Beach, they didn't have those resources there. They had to come from Barrie. So yes, I spend a little longer there, but the resources are coming. The issue is, where are my resources coming when the call is in knock? Who do I call that's going to get there as expeditiously as possible? Now, it's going to take a couple hours, yes, but I'm still better off than where I was. And, sorry if I may. Sometimes if I have to apprehend them under the Mental Health Act, it's because they've achieved a certain threshold that I can't. By the time that happens and I've taken them to Pembroke and then I'm sitting there with tying up 2 officers and I take them to Pembroke because at least they have the proper facility there. We have a bypass agreement that's coming into play where we bypass taking them to Barry's Bay or taking them to Renfrew because the best place for them is in Pembroke because that's where the mental health professionals are. And we all know mental health calls are on rise, especially given COVID, right? Everybody's got no patience realize that they don't like their significant other because now they're actually spending time with them. And it may sound funny, but it's true. It's crazy. They're sick of their kids. Send them back to school, right? It's all coming out, like neighbor disputes, family disputes, domestic stuff, everything that is patient's tied has gone up. So when I have to take that mental health person and then I gotta take them to Pembroke, that's 5 to 6 hours. What if I could call a local mental health professional to come and see them in the home? Now, hour and a half to get there, and then I walk away. In a perfect world, that's what community safety will be like. The challenge in your municipalities, which I'm sure you're already aware of, is you don't have the resources within your municipality. You probably have to work with your adjoining municipalities to share the limited finite resources that you have within Ramsey County. But that's part of your community safety well-being plans, is that you need to know, document it if you're all trying to draw from the same finite resource, because that's the only way you're going to get more, is by having proof that you've done the best you can to make it as efficient as possible. And more, you still need more. You need the data, right? You need the proof. So I'm here, absolutely 100%. I'm along for the ride. I don't mean to be here to be waving the community safety well-being plan flag. But to me, it makes sense that it works because I see it working on a smaller scale of the situation. It absolutely works. Right? I wouldn't have my prolific caller program working the way it does, and my mental health program, it wouldn't work if that didn't work. So I'm in for a dime, in for a dollar. I just can't do it myself. I'm just one of the partners that sits at the table with the municipality. But it's the municipality. Are you okay, George?
Thank you very much. Yes. Excellent. And we certainly enjoy having you here and appreciate you coming. And, as I say, we'll pick up those cards and make a few calls.
If you ever want to have me come back as a delegate for whatever reason, don't hesitate to call it. I'd love to come and see you again. And I may come and see you again anyways, even if you don't invite me, just to say hello.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Which was the way out?
Thank you.
So moving on to item 7, we have our public works report. I have a resolution that council accepts the public works report as presented. Can I get a word of the secretary? Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Russell.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Don't give her. Don't give her. Give her a softball.
The staff just wants to give a quick review.
Well, I think it's pretty clear what's up there, which is, I take a little bit of time for something that's not on the report. That's actually pretty good news. They started on Royal Pine.
Excellent.
So the road has been pulverized to 3 kilometers, and they'll be applying gravel. They haven't started today, tomorrow, and the hard surface will be on today. So we're moving ahead.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Oh, sorry.
They are agricultural both ends of the.
So yes, as we explained to council, there's a 1.5 kilometers at each end. So they've already pulverized it. That's what I talked to Ken Palmer today. He told me he's pulverized it like you look like. And he told me he's pulverized.
Well, just after the last meeting, there's somebody, you said at the last meeting that Royal Pines was ready to go. And they were concerned that it wasn't, they were just going to chip over the top of the road.
No, that they were ready to go and be ready to start.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll call for the vote. Councilor Buckle.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Councilor.
The other one in here is, sidewalk equipment will not be based out of Golden Lake. What's going to happen with that?
So we'll be bringing forward a report as to how we'll be dealing with the sidewalk equipment. It's just that we don't have a facility to put that right now, but we do have a plan.
Okay,
It'll come to the next meeting probably, no?
okay.
Any other comments? Seeing none, Councillor Buckle,
Yes.
Councillor Burns,
Yes,
Councillor Schoenfeld,
Yes,
Councillor Robinson,
Yes.
and yes, it's carried. Thank you. Item 7.2 is the Vulture Valley request. I have a resolution. The council accepts the Vulture Valley request revisited report as presented. And that the mayor be authorized to sign a letter indicating that the township will not be providing a donation to the project, as the township of Vulture Valley has access to funds provided by the province. And they will be getting the full 20,000 as budgeted from the township of Algona Wilberforce. And I got a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor Robinson. Questions, comments?
so just for clarification, we're not giving them the $20,000, right? Because they're getting it from someone else.
No. The $20,000 that we get every year, that's budgeted, they would get the 20,000, we're not giving them anything extra.
So what's the $20,000 budgeted for?
That's our contribution to the operations of the arena that council's traditionally given to them every year.
And that, okay, but in addition to that, we also subsidize any North Algona Wilberforce participants in the ring, right? With coffee.
There are some things that we do subsidize. But again, this year we haven't had anything.
Councillor Burns.
and Kevin, right, that's been going on for a number of years, which is support them for our residents. And back in 2016 and 17, we actually gave them 25,000 on top of that when they did their renovations on the room. For 2 years, they got 45,000.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Robinson.
And then one of the comments was that in the report indicated COVID-19 expenses. Has there been any dialogue with Vulture Valley on those costs? Because we're all been sort of itemizing the COVID-19 expenses and can use these as claims. What they're asking for seems to be sort of the same thing, but they're asking it from us. So I guess my question was, have we had that discussion?
And I guess I would have to.
It's not- The original letter that was sent to us was sent in May, and that was before the grants were announced. So there was no money. I asked two questions of Vulture Valley. One was a little more detailed on the expenses. And the other question I asked, would there be any reduction in the $20,000 being the program? I yet to get an answer for that. So conversations have been limited, but given what COVID expenses are, the touchless hand dryers are definitely a COVID expense. So the opportunity maybe, or what their request may be somewhat redundant now because they actually have that money today.
Okay.
Seeing no further comments or questions, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Buckle,
Yes.
Councillor Burns,
Yes,
Councillor Schoenfeld,
Yes,
Councillor Robinson.
Yes.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you. Item 7.3 is the reserves update. I have a resolution that council accepts the reserves update report as information only. I'm going to move her in a seconder. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Buckle. Questions or comments?
The treasurer is going to be in charge.
Okay. Councilor Byrne, you had a question?
The only one, this is, would have been nice to have this last week with the 60,000. I thought this should have maybe come out of higher working group funds, because we have $244,532 in.
Councilor Ivey.
Daniel, so I like what you've done, but we don't actually have that much money sitting somewhere, do we?
So if you go to the very last couple of lines, I put the balance as what I would say is how it exists in real life. So 2 million, 2.5 million in cash, and then accounts receivable, accounts payable. So that is how it actually exists. And I should also point out that this is at the end of 2019, the audited version.
So this is December 31, 2019, not 2020.
Yes.
So the way I look at it, then we do have, we're like short. Like I have a hard time saying taxes receivable, accounts receivable, maybe investments, and accounts payable. Like I can't see how that can go towards our reserves. Like the cash can, I can see that. I can see the investments they can, but like you can't make somebody pay money. Like, so to me, we have more stuff in revenue, in reserves than we did. If everybody said they wanted all the reserves drawn out for some strange unknown reason, we wouldn't have enough money to carry them. So that's my second question is, maybe as council at some point in time, we have to look at these and say which ones are redundant and do we need to be there, you know, or should there be more? And lastly, if we ever want to take stuff out of, let's say, the municipal hall for some strange and unknown reason, then we should be having a resolution or something saying we're withdrawing $10,000 out of the municipal hall reserve fund for, I don't know, something. Is that the proper procedure?
That is correct. So a reserve is just an internal restriction of your net surplus. It is entirely at your own discretion where they go. I mean, you're using it as a planning tool, and clearly some of them have fallen off. You don't know what they were planning for, or other things like that. So they should be gone through, and it is your discretion to clean them up or allocate them where you like. Mostly that's done through the budget process, where we're saying, take out of this and use it for this. But you could just do resolutions to clean them as well.
Councilor Byrne and then Councilor Robinson.
The one that I asked for in my last time of council, and I see it's still there, and it doesn't change, is the safe water, and that's in there for $50,000. Is there a reason behind that? Or?
We have thoughts on what it could be, Andrew.
Most likely, the safe water is protection of groundwater from site leachate from the landfills or even the salt here. That's an issue with municipalities, and usually there's a reserve bill specifically for that. Because we operate no water treatment plants, we would be looking at protecting water as opposed to treating water.
So if a neighbor down here had a broken town, you would have to use that money to help them or whatever?
That would be something that would be.
Councilor Robinson first.
I actually was very, very pleased with seeing this report, because that was something that I'd asked that we needed a starting point by which to start making some very concrete decisions. And to some extent, we may be underserved in some of the areas, but at least it gives us somewhere to say we need to tweak this or change that. And so I just wanted to comment that I was very happy to see it.
Councilor Buckland.
Just on the safe water, just thinking back to my previous role, I think some of that tied into the safe drinking water requirements for if we had to put filtration in the year at the community center as a result for testing. I think that's where some of that comes back from as well.
It's a high amount for that, but I will be bringing a report forward to council regarding to precautions that we should be taking with this property.
Any other comments or questions? Councilor Anderson?
So moving forward, are we going to look at some of these like individually at some point in time and say, the new fire hall, you know, is it important to keep $160,000 earmarked in reserves for that? Are we going to like try and group some together? Are we going to maybe, you know, clean things up?
So as our treasurer is leading us, I will speak on behalf of the treasurer department on that. With your new budget process, when you do the budget, I would think that we would put that in the process so that council will just decide this is where all your money is. You can start. So yes, you will be revisiting it, and you have to by 2021 have asset-based management. So it's something we have to do. So I would suggest the new treasurer will do that, and council will handle it.
Because I mean, I just look at policing, so we do have a large chunk of our budget that goes towards policing. I'm not sure why we have an additional $20,000 there. That seems like a redundant amount to that. And from my point of view as a counselor, I would sure like to see that the cash and our investments are very close to what our total reserve amount is.
So if I could speak to that, your reserve is a mathematical accounting concept. And it is calculated this way because those are the kind of standards we have. I'm not sure that we could ever do anything about that. I would like to say though, that those are real things. I mean, eventually we will roll over all of our taxes receivable into rolling real recollecting bill. So eventually all these items come through cash, just not ever held in cash at one point in time.
Yes, Councilor.
Another two I looked at here is the Rankin Fire Department and Golden Lake Fire Department, and we have on change in 2015. Was there any reason why they did?
None that
Like you're separate from the fire working capital.
yes. So none if I go back, and I couldn't find any written documentation that said that it was for something.
You can comment on that, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Rockwell.
That was actually when the truck replacement plans had been discussed in the past. There was an amount that it was determined that to do the fleet replacement, we had to budget X number of dollars every year. We were trying to start a vehicle asset management plan. That was the number that was punched in by the council of the day, which is much less than it should have been. And apparently it was never had anything added to it in the following 7 years. But that's where those two numbers came from. That was for fleet management.
Thank you, Dave.
Councilor Anderson.
And perhaps moving forward, when we do get around to doing this in our budget, maybe we should have little explanations with those. And so, because some of you have been on council for a number of years or past, then you'll be able to help with the historical reason why. And maybe that's a good reason to either A, continue it, or B, discontinue it. But moving forward, every time we put money into reserves, we should say the method, the method to the madness, why we did and what was the intention of.
And I do agree with Councilor Robinson that this is a great start. This is basically a report card of a point in time where we are now. And I understand what you're saying as well, the 15,000 for two fire departments, as we move towards full asset management plan, every dollar amount will have to be tied to a specific asset. Something like this will have to be changed. So you're right, we'll have to go through every item and make some of those changes as we move into the asset management plan.
There's going to be some hard decisions too, because what I think we're going to realize is just how much in debt we are.
other questions? Councilor.
The one at the bottom here, accounts receivable, 743,000, is that, number of that taxes that was the one that came last year?
Yeah, the taxes receivable are important.
That was for the end of 2019.
Correct.
That's not up to date.
No, up to date, I think we're at 1.2 million. But we still got our install.
Oh, yeah, okay.
If I recall, the number was a lot greater at the beginning of 2019, like that. Because there was, if I understood, a real push to get some of that amount down.
And they had worked very well. We're down to, in terms of problem and receivables, there's probably 30 that are 3 years or greater, maybe 60 that are 2 years in that range. And the 1 year is probably over 100. So it's down to a manageable list, and we have reached out to almost every single one of those properties. So they're either on payment plans, or we know what's going on, or they're coming up for tax.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Seeing no further questions, I'll call for the vote. Councilor Buckle,
Yes.
Councilor Byrne,
Yes,
Councilor Ricky Schonfeld,
Yes,
Councilor Robinson.
Yes,
Yes, that's carried. Thank you. Item 7.4 is the COVID-19 update. I have a resolution that council accepts the COVID-19 update report as information only. I'm going to move in a seconder. Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Councilor Robinson. Questions or comments? Councilor Ricky
just a definition of the interest relief provided. How does that figure?
I'll let the treasurer explain that one.
Sure, that is the, so you raise the interest on current taxes overdue between March and the end of September. So that would be people who didn't pay their interim 2020 bills, March, May, or now the final 2020 bills, which is August, October. So that is what we didn't charge in interest, not necessarily anything we paid, is what we didn't.
Councilor Byrne.
okay, we received 110,000 and we only roughly used 58,000. Is there going to be a problem with that?
So as you look at the bottom of the report, it says further significant expenses will be incurred in 2020. So this is what we've spent as of August 31st. We ordered a new window for it's going to be a couple $1,000 for the sliding window. We ordered laptop computers for the fire. We're ordering laptop computers for the fire department that'll allow them to do the external training that they have to do now. So they'll be a COVID expense. We're ordering a label making machine so we can make our own sign as we need to respond. And we're looking at a few things. So we're going to have the bulk of that 110 spent, and the province states will be rolled into a reserve at the end of the year. I think the best advice would be to spend as much as possible because there's a second intake, and we want to demonstrate we use what we do.
So we just keep adding to that 50.
We're going to be able to bring a report back in 2 months. It's going to be significant.
Okay, thank you.
Your interest relief continues on another 2 months yet,
I thought it was in August.
at the end of September, but this doesn't have September's interest.
Okay.
Seeing no further questions or comments, I'll call the vote. Councilor Buckle,
Yes.
Councilor Byrne,
Yes,
Councilor Ricky Schonfeld,
Yes,
Councilor Robinson,
yes,
and that's carried. Thank you. Item 7.5, I have a resolution that council accepts the press release report and that all of council submit a paragraph as a Word document, introducing themselves, their background and interest outside of council to the CAO to be used in upcoming weekly media releases. May I move in a second? Moved by Councillor Buckwald, seconded by Councillor Robinson. I'll maybe ask staff to expand a little bit on this.
Okay, this is a fun thing for us, but it means we might not be able to operate, press releases. But the bigger part of this, the more important part is with COVID, council hasn't made the exposure physically and you'd like some of the new people and some of the people that have in that council to look a little bit about their councilor. So we've taken the portraits and what we're going to do is you do that bio, we put the portrait on the website and it'll give a little more exposure to council, know your councilor because they can't see you now. We've been doing a lot of branding with council some of you've seen that fall ad where the mayor is involved, council in the picture. You're not out there now. So we're trying to promote you a little bit more. And it's good for people to know about it. And in the staff benefit, there's 5 press releases we won't have to do.
But if it's not big enough for full press release, just one line.
What we would do if there was information that week, we could still put the information out. But if it was a week where there's some weeks that you're going to have in the fall where there's not going to be a lot of information, so we'll use one of these. So we'll just try to get them all in by Christmas.
First 2 weeks of November, social distancing.
This is a suggestion for you, okay? We had a very fast behavior last year or week, you'll see we always pull one paragraph only to describe it all. So maybe the idea is how do you get the, it's a fun exercise.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Councillor Buckwald?
Yes.
Councillor Burns?
Yes.
Councillor Reddy-Schonfeld?
Yes,
Councillor Robinson?
Yes.
And yes, that's carried. Thank you. That brings us to correspondence. I have a resolution that council accepts correspondence items 9.1.1 to 9.1.4 as information. And then move in a second, moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor Buckley. Comments or questions? Seeing none, call the vote. Councillor Buckwald,
Yes.
Councillor Burns,
Yes.
Councillor Reddy-Schonfeld,
yes,
Councillor Robinson,
Yes.
and yes, that's carried. Item 9.2.1. I have a resolution that whereas the Township of North Algona Wilberforce received correspondence from the Golden Lake Property Owners Association regarding the placement of swim area buoys, and that council considers the expense in the 2021 budget discussion. Can I get a move in a second? Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Buckwald. Questions or comments? Councillor Reddy-Schonfeld?
if we provide the swim area buoy, are we somehow liable then because we're acknowledging there's an issue? And then because we supported that, then could we be liable if something bad did happen?
I can speak on that, sure. I apologize for having to leave like information. The swim thing and why we suggest to take it to budget is the Golden Lake Property Association will be providing more information so we can analyze it. So when we discuss it, we can discuss liabilities and we'll have more information at that time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in order for them to place buoys, it has to come back to the municipality.
It has to be the municipality.
And I believe we would be looking not just at Golden Lake, but all of our lakes, correct?
As a township, if you were going to do one, you might want to look at all.
So we're just gonna put this as a budget issue.
It would be something to discuss at budget, and at that time, our staff will bring more information. forward.
And then you just.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. Council Buckwell,
Yes.
Council Burns,
Yes,
Council Reggie Schoenfeld,
Yes,
Council Robinson,
Yes,
and yes, carried. Item 9.2.2, have a resolution that council directs staff to apply or not to apply for the digital service block grant. And I'm going to move it as seconded, moved by Council Burns, seconded by Council Robinson. Questions? Yes, Council Robinson.
I'm just wondering if staff could elaborate a little bit on the grant itself.
So this is similar to the digital grant that we received last year that we did, digital advertising mapping for the businesses, and this would provide money for staff. And if we do it ourselves, we don't get the wage paid, but we have to bring somebody in. The maximum that we can get, if we're looking at 100 businesses, would be up to $25,000. I think it'd be a stretch to say that we have between 100 and 200 businesses, but fine. I've looked at it, and other than doing similar to what we did before, I don't know what we can do. Council may be differently, but give me the information on it. It is work for staff. But it is $25,000, and there's no contribution from the municipality. If you want us to explore it, we can look at it.
You know, I just, can you scroll that down a little bit?
So this is basically what we did last year. And unless we do something different, you're just doing the same thing you did last year.
And this is to help a business that currently doesn't have a digital platform to get that up and running.
Well, all the businesses, and we could try to enhance business that have already got things started. Without putting a lot of work into it, I see this as similar to last year.
So I see the benefit if we can bring businesses forward in a digital realm. So it may be building on what we've already done in the prior year.
So what I would suggest, if council would like staff to look at it, the resolution would look so you can do whatever you want, and just the stroke. The deadline is October 31st, so we do have some time. And the council will leave it to staff. If there's no benefit to council, we're going to report back at the next meeting. If it's something that there is a benefit, we'll just along with an application. If the council would like to do that.
So I can just get a consensus from council. Would you like to go ahead and apply or not?
well, to me, we're not contributing anything, so if we do get $25,000, plus two, if we do get somebody, and then the squad member salary gets paid for, so in theory, we could be hiring somebody within our community or close by and giving them a wage, right? And so I think that's a positive thing. I know it's work, I get it, but like Maria said, we can build on what they had, perhaps employ somebody, and pick up maybe some, other things along the way.
And I would agree there could be businesses that weren't digital before COVID, which would be certainly interested in going that route again.
For example, when I was in DC, what do you call it, Uber Eats, went out to a bunch of local businesses. And the cost of setting up Uber Eats was about $400. They were able to get that going through. And these businesses just went through the roof. They're like, I never thought of this before. So there might be with COVID, there might be opportunities out there that we can bring to our businesses that they never thought of before.
And if we don't get it, we don't get it.
So just for council's information, the last one, our budget for what we received was $6,000. And only 1,200 of that can be used on material. So advertising or equipment, we have equipment now. So I would expect that if we get a grant, it would be somewhat similar, but that's still, I think it's 9 weeks to work, whatever, it is, or 6 weeks, whatever. So, if council, with the motion we will, we will see what we can do with it.
So I'll read it, that council directs staff to apply for the digital service squad grant. Call for the vote, Councilor Buckle,
Yes.
Councilor Burns,
Yes,
Councilor Recusonto,
Yes,
Councilor Robinson.
Yes.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you. Have a resolution 9.2.3, whereas the Township of North Algona Wilberforce received correspondence from the Township of Pointer Valley regarding North Algona Wilberforce. The Township notice to terminate the agreement with Pointer Valley for chief building official services, bylaw, and animal control. Secondly, that council directs the CAO to explore shared services with the Township of Pointer Valley, as well as investigate in-house service feasibility, specifically in regard to bylaw and animal control, with a report being brought forward to council for the first meeting in November. Questions or comments? Can I get a move in a second? Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Recusonto. So there's actually, I have a note here that there's 2 resolutions. One is for bylaw and animal control, and the other one is for chief building official services. But we'll deal with this one first. This one is for, this is the one for bylaw and animal control. Comments or, oh, sorry.
So just a little information for council, because this is sort of unexpected. In that letter, Pointer Valley sent 2 bylaws that they created for shared services. One was on animals and the other one was on bylaw services. I did inquire to Pointer Valley about what they are. The bylaw service one was not to do bylaw, not to provide them the bylaw officer, but to provide them with the backup service of bylaw officers. I looked at the agreement that they are proposing. It has no benefit to the Township of North Algona Wilberforce, and it's actually lost the Township of North Algona Wilberforce. So I did bring up, and I apologize for being slow, a bylaw today to counter their bylaw, and what we're asking for is discussion. And this is probably something we would go back with. So the bylaw you should have up on the screen for the bylaw enforcement, and this is what we would propose, a similar thing to this.
So this is our Schedule A and not.
This would be our scheduling. So just to point out a few things, in what they have proposed up on the board, basically they're paying the hourly wage for our bylaw officer. There's no protection for our municipality at all in what they're proposing. And we could be taking our bylaw officer away from doing the job here. And another thing missing, which we have on our shared service agreement for the application, there's no annual fee for the service, which I put in there because we are keeping our bylaw officer, we're supplying the bylaw officer with equipment, and there's a capital cost to keep a bylaw officer operating. So I suggested if you look under number 2, $1,000 annual fee. And also, if they're called out with less than 24 hours notice, there would be a premium for that, it would be $100. And the reason for that is you have to call someone from home. And the other thing that Township Valley put in was a maximum of 2 hours for every call. We put a minimum. I just changed it because if you're calling our person out and they're paid by 15-minute intervals, if they get to the scene and there's nothing to do, they got paid for 15 minutes. That's unrealistic. So we put a 2-hour minimum. There's also no protection for a bylaw officer. So when you have a bylaw officer doing something, you have to appoint them. So I put that in on 3A, that they would have to appoint a resolution of bylaw officers. 3B, bylaw officers will exercise their full powers under the laws of the province of Ontario at their discretion, and will not be directed or coerced into enforcement or lack of enforcement of any bylaw. You heard Pat here, when we were talking with bylaws at a conference call, this is pretty well verbatim with what Pat said, when we're talking about COVID. If you have a bylaw officer, you can't tell them what to do. As council, you could say dogs are a problem in the township, and our bylaw officers would react to that. But you can't say go to Fred's house and charge them because the dog barks. So we don't want to get into a situation where our officers are sent someplace and being given a job that they shouldn't be given. When they see the problem, they should be using the powers that they were given and the skills that they have to say, this is a problem, and I'm going to lay a provincial offense charge. Council can direct that we want to go with enforcement if we can. That was our enforcement, or they can say, let's do the education thing. That's what council said when we formed our bylaw department. That's what we're doing. But we need to protect our bylaw officers, that they're allowed to do their job when they're in another municipality. And another important thing I put in for C, the township of Algona Wilberforce is not in any way liable for any actions that enforcement officers take when performing the duties. So we don't want to have something that happens in Township Valley come back to our municipality that we're liable for. So I put a few things in like that to protect us. But the reason I brought this forward, this is something we go and discuss if we want to talk about it. This is what we talk about. But the bylaw that they gave us has no benefit for this township at all, and we'd be losing money agreeing to do it.
Councilor Buckland.
How are we defining secondary enforcement services?
So what secondary enforcement services mean in another part of the schedule, this would be the schedule of glossary. Okay. So what they ask is to be backup. So this would be secondary. So we're not defining bylaw enforcement officer. When you were sworn in as a bylaw enforcement officer, you're sworn into a whole 3 bylaws of the township of Township Valley. So that's why you have to have a whole gamut, because you may see something in your job. But this needs work. It needs the glossary. But that one-page thing, this is an agreement I would suggest the township even consider signing. What I would like to see is the township, if you're interested in doing it, could be instruction to take someone like this back and start working together. This was not a working together thing. This was a thing sent by Township Valley to us without any reduction.
So we don't know if this is, they're looking for someone to back up their officer, or is it covered subject, however, they're often not available?
So my question to the CAO was, is this for the primary or backup? And the answer was backup. So the other thing we don't want is, if Fred's a real problem, well, why don't we call not to do the Fred problem? So I want to make sure there's enough protection for us in there, that when we send our law enforcement officer, that they're protected. Another thing in here, like, must just get by, I don't know, the section, I also put in that any court costs, legal fees are Bolshevik Valley costs. Because you don't want to be paid $25 an hour to go and do something in their contract, and then you get $3,000 in legal fees. So it even says, I think, in their accommodation would be paid for with auto court or whatever. But there's a lot of things we need to put in there. If council is willing to share, the other thing I put in there, there would be no more than 10 hours a week.
So just for clarification though, it's sharing her not as a primary, it's sharing our bylaw officer not as a primary. It says a backup.
It's a secondary.
Right.
So if they get 30 calls, and they can only handle 20, then they say, hey, can you have our bylaw come over and do it? And also, if there's a call to go see a guy that's been known to be a belligerent, you want to send 2 officers to go to that. So if they only have 1 officer, then that may be the reason.
Right, and would there be a proviso in this, we can terminate this at any time? Or do
So-
we have to go by a year? Or do
So
we-
what they suggested was 90 days. What I put in the contract when I rewrote it was 30 days. Because we want to get out of it fast, not like the other.
No, that's, I agree with that. And you want to make sure you have something in there that you can get rid of it.
Because if you are going to say the 120 days or a year, and we decide that we don't have a use for bylaw enforcement in the township, or Algona Wilberforce, so we can't afford to have a bylaw, then we'd still be obligated to do their bylaw for
Right.
another year.
And you think we'd be losing money simply because like the capital costs of keeping our bylaw officers equipped, we wouldn't be.
We'll just send our bylaw officer in. So it's Tuesday, and they call us, and they want a bylaw officer for Tuesday. So our bylaw officer was scheduled to come in Tuesday. And they want a bylaw officer to go to the call at the edge of Edenville. And it takes 10 minutes to drive there, and they go, and the guy's not home, and has the dog, barking dog, and our bylaw turns around, and it was a half an hour. We're paying our bylaw officer half an hour. That's the reasonable call for our bylaw officer, no. So we need to protect our workers, so we'd have our bylaw officer do something else here for an hour and a half or 2 hours, to make up some time, but we wouldn't normally do that. So what I'm saying in the contract that we have, we'd be charging a premium, I just put $55 an hour. So that would cover all the other expenses that the bylaw officer has. $1,000 a year is just so it makes it worth it for us to do it for somebody else, to have that equipment in place and have this. Because we have 1 bylaw officer scheduled to work, but we have 2 available for the upkeep. We need some contribution. And when we talk about animal control, you will see that the other party likes to have contributions. So maybe just getting into the animal control, what they did with animal control is they sent a similar agreement with the officer for animal control. But what they didn't know in the contract was that we pay, as 6 other municipalities pay, $335 a month just to have kennel services, not to use the kennel, just to have kennel services, which is $4,020 a year. For if we don't use it, it's for nothing. So for us to have a bylaw officer, we're only asking $1,000 a year. They're asking $4,000 for their kennel. They're asking 6 other parties to do that.
That's where I think, like, I can't remember the figures from the budget, but it did cost us quite a bit of money to get the bylaw officer up and all their gear and stuff. $1,000 a year to me is not enough. So if we have to-
And I just did something to start.
No, I know, that's
But to say that we would just give them our bylaw for an hourly rate we have the same expenses they have
Yeah,
with other things they provide us.
Councilor Buckle.
Two more questions. One, has there been any discussion with our bylaw officer if she's even interested in taking this on?
We have discussed that.
And two, if our primary bylaw officer is not available, would this also apply to her backups? Would they be available?
So we would be providing the service. And so all of our bylaw officers would be sworn in Bone Shore Valley when called, when requested, they would be bylaw officer. So yes, it would be all of our bylaw.
And just to refresh, the resolution is basically to explore the shared services further and investigate the feasibility specifically, and then to bring a report back to council for the first meeting in November. Councilor Bernard.
I just had a question to Joe. So do you have to spend a number of hours just reading over the bylaws, or do you have to finish it? You have to talk to them.
It depends on how many bylaws they have that, and I have set times with them.
That would take a number of hours.
But it would-
And I can add some more to that, no, just go ahead, and I put it in that agreement. So when you go to a call, it's not just the 15 minutes of going to the call. You have to research as to what the issue is. So once you know the bylaws, you still have to call the Trevor had a problem before. What was done the last time Fred had a problem? And there's a writing up of the report. So they had suggested $25 as a administration fee. To me, that's $25 for the office. That's not for our bylaw. That's for the billing. But our bylaw officer, to go for that 20-minute call, may spend 4 hours on that 20-minute call, because they have to do research on what happened before. So there's a lot more to it than a one-page agreement.
Any other questions, comments? So I will call for the vote.
Can you just read the resolution?
Sure. Whereas the Township of North Algona Wilberforce received correspondence from the Township of Bone Shore Valley regarding North Algona Wilberforce Township notice to terminate the agreement with Bone Shore Valley for the Chief Building Official Services bylaw and animal control. That council directs the CAO to explore shared services with the Township of Bone Shore Valley, as well as investigate in-house service feasibility, specifically in regard to bylaw and animal control, with a report being brought forward to council for the first meeting in November. Councilor Buckle?
Yes.
Councilor Byrne?
Yes.
Councilor Rankin-Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Councilor Robinson?
Yes.
And a yes, is carried. Thank you. Item 9.2.3, I have a resolution. Whereas the Township of North Algona Wilberforce received correspondence from the Township of Bone Shore Valley regarding North Algona Wilberforce Township notice to terminate the agreement with Bone Shore Valley for Chief Building Official Services bylaw and animal control. That the mayor be authorized to sign a response letter to the Township of Bone Shore Valley that their request to terminate the agreements at the end of the year has not been accepted, and the Township of North Algona Wilberforce is willing to entertain discussion on an agreement termination date for both parties. And maybe staff can explain that one a little bit.
So as council recalls, we sent 2 letters to Bone Shore Valley. One was for the service, one was for the chief building inspector. Bone Shore Valley, I asked the question, is this to terminate the service? Is this to terminate the CBO? So you want that it will both? It's only one letter. Right now, the Township of North Algona Wilberforce is in a good position for negotiation, and I would suggest that Bone Shore Valley should come to the table and negotiate to terminate the service in a way that works for both, because we need some flexibility to to explore the CBO. For us to do the CBO is something that we're not going to have ready at the beginning of the year. It may be the discussion to terminate both services the 1st of April, but it's something that wasn't discussed we asked for the discussion, we didn't get it. Right now, you're in the driver's seat, you should go back and ask for the discussion again.
Well, that's for a move in a second, and then we can open discussion on this. Moved by Councilor Burns, seconded by Councilor Robinson. Questions, comments? Just to refresh my memory, there's an agreement that says we have to give a year's notice to terminate the service, but there's also an agreement that says we only need, is it 30 days?
Yeah, so when the agreements were originally made, there was an agreement to appoint the CEO named person. And the termination of that was at 120 days notice by the party. And then the service itself was out at 1 year notice by the party. So your 1 year termination, given the letter sent on August 19th, would be August 19th, 2021, and December 17th for the termination of the CEO. They're proposing that you do it January 1st. What I'm suggesting to the council is some discussion should actually happen, because it didn't happen. That response. And there can be an agreement that both parties find favorable, but that discussion hasn't started.
And basically, the resolution then just talks about starting that discussion.
Correct.
Councilor Buckle.
So did we have any discussions with them, making clear that it wasn't our intention to end the contract now, but we just wanted to be able to look at options? Like, were they made aware of that?
So that's basically what our last letter said, that we would entertain discussion. What we got back was the response, not the discussion. I would expect that we should have a discussion.
But we did say in that letter that one of the options could be that we would continue the shared service.
Yeah.
But we just wanted to explore different avenues. Any other comments, questions? Call for the vote. Councilor Buckle,
Yes.
Councilor Byrne,
Yes.
Councilor Reggie Schoenfeld,
Yes,
Councilor Robinson,
Yes.
and yes, Barry. Item 9.2.4. I have a resolution that council acknowledges the correspondence from Richard Hunt of the Eganville District Sportsman's Club regarding assistance for possible additional expenses to impede public access if determined by the chief firearms officer, and that the CAO make a formal inquiry to the chief firearms officer regarding this matter. I'm going to move it to seconded. Moved by Councilor Robinson, seconded by Councilor Buckle. Everybody have a chance to read the letter? Any questions? Councilor Schoenfeld.
I thought at one point when we were first starting this, that the gun club was fine with what we're doing. Was I wrong when I assumed that? Because it sure seems like they're not fine.
So I can, so the sportsman club does have representation on our committee. And there's definitely not been anything on the committee that would say no. We did have a discussion with Mr. Hunton the other day. And his concern is people accessing the gun club property from the trail. He didn't voice any concern other than that. And that concern is, will it cost them more to contain people so they don't come on the gun club property? Having extensive time and effort spent with the chief firearms office in regards to shooting ranges, there is nothing in the legislation that guides our for shooting ranges that says there has to be a fence, and we talked a little bit about a fence. What has to be done is due diligence. So the actual reading from the act, it says that you can't. The act does not specify that any restriction in entering the range, only that there will be adequate warning system to one person. So as long as they have a sign, that's all there is. The chief firearms officer, and I've had this discussion with the chief firearms officer, will not tell them they have to put a fence. It's not, if a fence is required, they're going to have to determine that themselves. The chief firearms officer only goes by what the law says, and the law says they have to have adequate warning. So they have to have adequate signs. Your due diligence is the signage that can be seen. There's no other due diligence required as far as the fence. If someone is going to walk onto a property that they're shooting, as long as they're warned, that's your due diligence. If there's something that has to happen or there's some agreement, like we said to the club that we would ask the fire, we would ask if there has to be agreement. So I'm going to ask the chief firearms office if council direct me, and there may be nothing that they're going to direct that has to happen.
Yeah, excellent.
Like, so I'd like to know what the definition of adequate signage is. Is it every 10 feet, every 5 feet? Is it just one big sign?
So there's a 160-page manual that tells you what you should be doing. And unfortunately, in all the stuff in the manual, it goes back to the act, which is 6 pages, and there's only that line that has to be adequate. And it's basically open legislation, open wording, that means that you have to figure out what adequate is. Certainly you should be able to see it. And certainly from our standpoint of the trail, we can make signage, but it is the workman's responsibility to have signage.
Right. I guess my thing is, lots of times in law, it's what a reasonable person would do, right? And so sometimes if you prove that you didn't do your diligence and you weren't being reasonable, then it comes back to bite you. So I mean, my thing is, it's unfortunate now they bring this up, but that being said, moving forward, what are we going to do to ensure the safety of everyone? And truly, I guess somebody's got to figure out what adequate is. If it's, several signs along the trail showing, is it one big sign? Because I think that's just important.
Council Bird.
I remember there used to be a shooting range one time in Township, and the signs that they had up was pretty close together. Like if you look at that one, you normally see that one over there. There was no fences, it was just private property, shooting range. Just there.
There's two requirements for signage. One is that when you're outside of the property, you have to have that adequate signage, which maybe sort of give you whatever it is. The other requirement is when shooting is going on, there has to be a warning that shooting is going on. So whether it be a flag or a light system, a red light on when you're shooting, or a red flag. We don't want people to use on property. So we, as the municipality, would have the ability to make a complaint to the chief firearms office that we do not believe the signage is adequate. We can do that. But the chief firearms office will not define adequate. They will only look at it and be satisfied that it's adequate or not adequate. It's the way law and legislation is. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're just going to tell you to don't.
Interestingly enough, they raised the concern about derelict, or about the trail, the wilderness trail, where it borders our access. But they have not done anything in regards to the derelict road, which the property borders on. And so they have no complaint about that part, but now they're complaining about the local trail section.
And I will say that Rick Hunton was very good to talk to and did not express any concerns about the trail, only that they want to protect what they have. I think that he's a workable person, and we haven't seen anything from the club that said, no, we don't want to see the trail. It's all part of the process, and right now the process would be check with the chief fireman's office, which designate ranges, and then go from there and bring the report back to council.
Councilor Burke.
Does a trail run right beside their property?
It does abut their property. But that's 66-foot right of way that our road allowance that is always there. As you know, if you buy a piece of property, your lawyer's going to tell you the road allowance is like your property and someone might put a road there or something. That's something that's known.
So I'll call for the vote. Councilor Buckland.
Yes.
Councilor Burke.
Yes.
Councilor Reddy Shinko.
Yes,
Councilor Robinson.
Yes.
And a yes. So that brings us to item 10, which is bylaws. I have a resolution that council enact the following shoreline road closing and animals running at large bylaws. First bylaw is 2020-79 for beaches, Ovina Region, Part 1, Plan 49R-19578 shoreline. 2020-80 beaches, Ovina Region, Part 1, Plan 49R-19578 restricted covenants. And 2020-81 bylaw to regulate or prohibit animals running at large. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councilor Buckwalter, seconded by Councilor Burke. Questions, comments? Councilor Anderson.
just an education. What is a restricted covenant? What is unrestricted? With the
Yeah.
definition.
I can give you the definition. Basically, it's a written statement that's put on the land and the title of the land.
In the title of the land. So if you went down to the Renfrew County, you'd
You
see,
didn't see that. It'll be on forever.
okay. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for the vote. Councilor Buckwalter,
Yes.
Councilor Burke,
Yes.
Councilor Reddy-Shinko,
Yes,
Councilor Robinson.
Yes.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you. We have, no matters of urgency, any notice of motions, upcoming meetings and unfinished business. Our next regular meeting of council is October 6th, 2020 at 7 p.m.
and I guess one comment, I truly didn't remember the meeting with the agenda today. So I'm not sure if I really liked when Laura had sent out the thing in August, here's important dates to remember. I don't know if that's possible, that adds too much work on, but truly, because usually I'm really good at putting stuff in my calendar and I totally missed that. So I don't know if it's just a possibility to keep everybody on target. Yes,
Agenda manager will fix all that.
hopefully.
Okay, so I have a resolution that council go into a closed meeting at 2:45 p.m. Pursuant to section 239 2B of the Municipal Act for personal matters about identifying the individual, including municipal or local board employees. And then moving the second, moved by Councilor Robinson, seconded by Councilor Green. Okay, thank you very much. We'll take 5 minutes and we'll be back here at